Now to our report digging into the big news tonight. The nation's highest court ruling against Donald Trump, clearing the way for New York prosecutors to get Trump's secret and coveted financial records. To understand this monumental ruling, why it's a loss for Trump and a win for the principle that no one's above the law, it does help to remember how we got here. This all began with Trump's hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, first revealed through the Mueller probe. But Bob Mueller never tried to address the legal question about if any of those payments or cover-up were crimes. That was picked up and investigated by federal and local prosecutors in the place where those payments were made, New York. The feds convicting Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, for his involvement, and that's why he went to prison. And as we just were mentioning, he was actually taken back into custody today after being out on home confinement. So that was just one federal case. But even worse for Trump, in an area where he has no power to pardon the crimes if they occurred, the New York DA was then bearing down on a probe of related issues in the Trump organization.
The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is considering pursuing criminal charges against the Trump Organization.
Prosecutors in New York have subpoenaed 8 years' worth of President Trump's tax returns.
He's asking for documents related to the hush money payments for porn star Stormy Daniels.
The president's outside attorneys, led by Jay Sekulow, again going to court to try to block the release of these tax returns.
Today, a federal appeals court ruled President Trump's accounting firm must turn over 8 years of tax returns to Manhattan prosecutors.
Trump is going to get his day at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court agreed today to take up the president's appeals of a number of cases involving access to his financial records.
Donald Trump has taken his years-long fight to keep his taxes secret all the way to the Supreme Court today. We've all been watching this fight. And against that background and all that pressure, Trump was resisting, trying to delay, trying to sue his way out of it, and then trying to make these sweeping claims of presidential immunity, taking that all the way to the Supreme Court. Trump lawyer Jay Sekulow told the court they should recognize a broad immunity for Trump so he wouldn't have to cooperate with criminal proceedings while he's at the White House. And that is the claim Trump lost today. Think about it like this. In a year of admittedly many consequential moments, July 9th, 2020, will go down in Supreme Court and American history as a defining moment where Donald Trump lost big, and created new, long-standing precedent on the limits of presidential powers, the opposite of what he was trying to do. Now, Trump's claims departed from many presidents who either cooperated or ultimately were forced to turn over evidence, from President Nixon's infamous Watergate tapes to President Clinton cooperating with civil and criminal requests for his own testimony, which, of course, is a more demanding evidentiary request than what this New York DA is asking of Trump. Tonight, the state of American law governing the powers of the president is different than it was yesterday. This is no small development. It comes after a multi-year legal and governmental battle to try to hold this president accountable, a president who basically was arguing literally out loud the law just shouldn't apply to him.
The president is not above the law. He will be held accountable.
He's trampling on the Constitution, no doubt about it.
No one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States.
There is nothing more dangerous than an unethical president who believes they are above the law.
The president is not above the law.
Nobody, not the president, nobody may be above the law, and we have to enforce that.
You've heard that a lot from many people, nonpartisan experts, legal constitutional scholars, and as you saw there, many people who happen to be Democrats and oppose the president. This is what's so big tonight, and I want you to remember it. Today, the Supreme Court ruled all of that is true and is constitutional law of the land, and is not like basically true or in the ballpark, but literally those exact words, that exact holding, as the lawyers like to say. Chief Justice Roberts ruling explicitly that, quote, no citizen, not even the president, is above the duty to produce evidence in a criminal proceeding. That legal duty is the law. The president, not above it. Now, from Donald Trump's view, it gets even worse. This is an overwhelming loss, as several of our experts had mentioned earlier in our coverage, with 7 justices ruling against him, 4 Democratic appointees and 3 Republican appointees. 2 of those are Donald Trump's recent appointees, Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, who wrote his own opinion, siding against Donald Trump and stating, quote, "No one is above the law. That principle applies, of course, to a president." That applies to a president, any president, even the president who gave you the promotion of a lifetime. Whatever one thinks of these justices, this broad ruling today shows how legally extreme and wrong Donald Trump's claims were. And while he may see everything in government or even life as a transactional payback scheme, remember this, it's a good thing. That is not how it all works. And today, in this case, it's not how the Supreme Court works. So that's how we got here. That's how bad Trump lost. And I mean, we could stop right here, but this is the beat. And this is a huge, exciting, intricate, historic ruling. So before we bring in more of our legal eagles, and we have 2 favorites standing by, I do want to share with you what our team has been poring over today, the highlights and the implications for what comes next. Today's ruling doesn't release Trump's tax returns in public. It means the New York DA can get them in its probe, just like evidence from any other person, holding Trump to account because he's not immune from state criminal subpoenas, as you see there, nor does he get special treatment like a heightened standard of need. And the court is clear that this sets a new precedent for all future presidents, confirming that beyond the feds, this is the new part, state and local prosecutors can also force a president to fork over evidence. Now, Trump's lawyers had been arguing for a categorical immunity, a courtroom version of Trump's claims that even if he shot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, as he's literally bragged about, he could be immune. Justice Roberts saying no, the president is not immune, whether the probe is about him or someone else, and noting prosecutors advance the public with a right to quote every man's evidence, including the president. That's the Supreme Court telling Donald Trump, on this obligation, you are not special. You got to produce the evidence just like, quote, every man, because no man or woman is above the law. Republican appointed Chief Justice Roberts also drawing attention to how Trump is a historical outlier. We've discussed this on tonight's show and in our coverage beforehand, but now you have a coalition of justices noting it. Donald Trump's defiance of the law goes well beyond most any president in either party. Now, that's quite a critique. Justice Roberts offering it in historical and diplomatic tones, noting how, beginning with Jefferson and carrying on through Clinton, presidents have uniformly testified or produced documents in criminal proceedings. Whatever one thinks of Bill Clinton and the probes he faced, unlike Donald Trump, he did voluntarily testify in a criminal grand jury investigation, as Roberts notes. And then the Chief Justice walks through the precedent long before Bill Clinton, like back in 1807 when Jefferson's vice president, Burr, was on trial for treason, on trial because he wasn't above the law. Well, today's ruling revisits that trial in detail and notes it was the greatest spectacle in what was then the short history of the Republic. Even during that trial, Chief Justice Marshall granting Burr's motion for a subpoena of, yes, President Jefferson. And Roberts writes that in the 2 centuries since Burr, successive presidents have accepted Marshall's ruling that the chief executive is subject to subpoena and have uniformly agreed to testify when called in criminal proceedings, a theme that was common in both Trump-related Supreme Court rulings today. The court has not had to rule on issues like this before, basically because there weren't presidents that defied things this much. There were skirmishes, there were battles to be sure, but presidents typically followed the rules of criminal evidence when independent, nonpartisan prosecutors are doing what they're supposed to do, enforce the law and find crime. Now, Roberts cites those past presidents and how they cooperate, writing 2 centuries of experience confirms that a properly tailed criminal subpoena will not normally hamper the performance of a president's constitutional duties. Now, Bill Barr has presented the opposite argument, that it's too big a burden or no president like Donald Trump should have to deal with it. And I want you to see this, too, because all of these details matter. They are now going to be the law of the land. Roberts rebuts that Bill Barr Trumpian claim that somehow there'd be a stigma of being subpoenaed and it would undermine the president's leadership at home and abroad, pointing out that Trump's own lawyer, the Solicitor General, doesn't even endorse that argument on behalf of the United States. Roberts also notes all of this might be because the High Court has denied already twice any attempted absolute immunity claims by any other presidents facing misconduct allegations. This is not the only time that Donald Trump's allies have broken with him. Donald Trump's quest to fortify the powers of the presidency, even if it was only for his own behalf, his own selfish interest, to create some new absolute immunity, that has backfired. The Supreme Court forced to take a side here, and they didn't take Trump's side. This is the new standard. This is the law of the land, and this stands for all future presidents to come. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.